I wanted to be a guitar player, but you know, I wasn't that good. I thought I was good, but I wasn't that good. There was a guy who lived across the street who was always playing this crazy Frank Zappa and Jimi Hendrix. One time I went and I knocked on his door and I just said, you know, what is that stuff? Can you teach me how to play it? And he said, come on in. I made friends with him. I was 17 years old and he was, you know, I think 30 or something. And he taught me a lot of cool guitar stuff, but he also was a glass artist. You know, he said, do you want to do an apprenticeship with me? And I said, sure. And so it was kind of this very unofficial apprenticeship. And that's how I got into it. And I remember I'd be down in the basement working on the pool table that we had a piece of plywood over. And he'd be off playing golf on some nice sunny day. And I'd be down there in the dark breathing toxic fumes. And he'd come back and, you know, half the time he wouldn't even pay me. I'd get in fights with him and storm off and come back. And he'd always say to me, one day you'll thank me for this because I'm actually teaching you a trade. And I was like, yeah, go to hell, Joe. I'll never thank you for this. But he was right. And one day, indeed, I did thank him. I still thank him. Thank you, Joe. Whatever. I first got interested in stained glass when I was traveling with my mom. I was about 10 years old, and I was traveling with her on a train to Edinburgh in Scotland, and we stopped into a bookstore. I remember seeing this big reference book, the rose windows of the world. It was all the cathedral stained glass of all over the world, of Notre Dame, and all the rose windows from everywhere, and it was psychedelic. It was captivating. I remember just looking at it and just thinking, this is so cool. And I'm realizing that people did this in the Middle Ages, that there was people out there just put in so much time and energy into creating things of beauty and of kind of kaleidoscopic, psychedelic color. When people were dying of the bubonic plague, I was like, this is cool. So I was living in London and I applied for this apprenticeship at Goddard and Gibb. I worked for them as a fabricator. They do the stodgy old saints and stuff for Buckingham Palace, and they're very traditional. And it was just an incredible experience. It was like stepping back into the Dickensian times. People just, you know, smoking cigarettes with lead all over their fingers. You know, they all go play pool at lunchtime and drink pints of Guinness. And yeah, I talk about art, and they would just think, you know, I was like a flaky American. But it was great, and I learned a lot, and they were really good craftsmen. I also brushed up on my pool game a lot at lunchtime, my Guinness drinking. The history of stained glass has evolved very, very little. It's basically, the way I make it here is the way it's always pretty much been made, you know, except for I don't have my soldering iron heating up in a bed of coals. It's gone through many different swells in popularity. It had kind of a burst of decorative enthusiasm at the turn of the century. And then it went through kind of a slump, and then it reared its head again in the 1970s in the form of kind of kitschness and craftiness, and I think that's given it a bad name, and stained glass has been trying to escape from this kind of sun catcher, rainbow, little cardinal on a limb. You know, I fight that constantly. It needs to be reinvented. That's what I see part of my job is reinventing the medium of glass, bringing it into a crisp, new sense of design. I'd like to help restore its status as a great decorative element, as a great architectural feature. The California building is kind of ground zero in Northeast for the art scene. It's a building for working artists. These are art studios. It's two buildings, and there's a sort of weird 1950s little boxy thing that connects the two buildings. And John and Jen, the owners of the building, have had this vision of opening it up and doing something kind of spectacular there, something architectural.
We gave him the free hand. You make something beautiful. That's the only requirement. Yes, we can talk about the architecture of the older buildings and the newer building and how does it connect the buildings and how we use it as a community space. We build community, so we like to build places like lobbies where their community can occur.
We wanted something light, something modern, something fun. So I've actually kind of invented this technique. This is something that nobody else does. Etch in glass and then adhere in this stained glass, mouth-blown German, very high quality, high lead crystal content stained glass pieces to the etched glass. And they got the idea from those window gels that kids do, you know, those kind of rubbery things, and they stick them on the car windows. And I saw them floating one day, and I thought, wouldn't that be cool to, you know, have colored glass float like that, like candy or something, without any arbitrary lines or without all the heavy kind of medieval past of stained glass. I like to use the mouth-blown glass just because it has a lot of lead crystal, it has a lot of refractive properties, and it's just beautiful. It has air bubbles and various different striations in it, and it's never the same. No two pieces are ever the same. It's not uniform, so the thickness is different. Hence, even from the same sheet, the color varies. That's what I love about working with glass, is you're actually using light as a tool. Light is one of our tools, and it's you know, it's the unquantifiable. You know, it's a very natural thing. You think of this glass, it's all man-made and cut and blown, and you know, and this big piece of industrial glass is tempered and etched, and it all seems very mechanized. But the other dimension is the sun, and that will pass through it. And when these are up with the sun coming through them, that's when they truly come to life.
We build for the long term. Yeah, at night with the light coming through. You know, we want this to be there in 100 years. So, you know, make it right.
I think it really helped define what the California building is. It lends some permanence, I think, to the whole idea that this is an art studio building.
We're all very happy with ourselves. It's disgusting. I love the idea that you're making something that just kind of becomes part of the public domain. You know, it's not just stuck in somebody's home where no one can see it. It's the whole public can enjoy it. That's the direction I'm going in. I would like ultimately to do more public art and to get the community involved with it. And I've done a lot of stuff in the library systems. I have a sculpture out at the Wayzata Public Library, and then I did the glass at the Linden Hills Public Library in Minneapolis. And then I just finished one for the Plymouth Public Library in 2010. I think it's important to beautify the environments we live in, and it's important to be able to know where you are. I think it delineates environments. It creates a sense of space and stops us from getting a kind of disoriented sense of vertigo from not knowing whether the Starbucks we came out of is the one we're going into, you know, or the subway across the street is the one in Denver or in Little Falls or in Idaho, you know. We're increasingly living in a world of, for lack of a better word, a kind of sameness. But I think that public art stops that trend. Public art takes back space. And to be in libraries and meditative places and to have your work there, I think is a very important thing. And it'll be there for years and years to come, so it excites me.